r/ProRevenge family told me to figure it out, so I disappeared forever. Figure it out yourself. Those 4 words hit me like a slap across the face as I stood in my father's home office, clutching the Stanford acceptance letter that should have been cause for celebration. Instead, my mother didn't even look up from her phone, and my dad just shrugged like I'd asked him for pocket change instead of college tuition. But you paid for Madison's entire Columbia experience, I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay calm. Room, board, study abroad, everything. She didn't even have to apply for financial aid. My father finally glanced up from his computer screen, his expression as cold as winter concrete. Madison had better grades. She earned it. The lie burned worse than the rejection. We both knew Madison had partied her way through high school with a 3.2 GPA while I'd maintained a 4.0 and worked 2 part-time jobs. But Madison was the golden child, the one who looked perfect in family Christmas photos and brought home boyfriends that made my parents beam with pride. I was just the spare. I got into Stanford, I repeated, waving the letter like it might somehow change their minds. Full ride academically would still leave $15,000 a year for housing and expenses. That's nothing to you. My mother's manicured nails clicked against her phone screen as she typed. Figure it out yourself, honey. You're almost 18. Time to be independent. The irony was suffocating. Madison was 21 and still having her rent paid, her car payments covered, her credit card bills handled by daddy's accountant. But somehow I needed to learn independence at 17. I looked around the office, at the oil paintings worth more than most people's cars, at the mahogany desk that cost more than a year's community college tuition, at the window overlooking our 3-car garage housing vehicles that collectively cost more than my entire future education. So that's it? I asked. 4 years of straight A's, perfect attendance, debate team captain, volunteer work, none of that matters. You're being dramatic, Mom said without looking up. Community college exists for a reason. Work your way up like normal people do. Normal people. Like we weren't sitting in a house worth $2.3 million. That's when something shifted inside me. Not broke, breaking implies it could be fixed. This was different. This was the moment I realized I was looking at strangers. People who shared my DNA but had never actually seen me as their child. Okay, I said quietly. Dad nodded approvingly, probably thinking he'd taught me some valuable lesson about self-reliance. Good. Character building. You'll thank us someday. I folded the Stanford letter carefully and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Mom called after me. I paused in the doorway, looking back at them one last time, really looking. My father, who'd inherited his wealth and lectured me about earning my way. My mother, who'd never worked a day in her life but preached independence. I'm going to figure it out, I said. Neither of them realized those would be the last words I'd ever speak to them. As I climbed the stairs to my room, my mind was already working. They wanted me to figure it out myself. Fine. I'd figure out how to succeed without them. How to thrive without them. How to disappear without them ever finding me again. After all, they taught me well. Family helps family, unless you're not really family at all. The next morning, I sat at our marble kitchen island eating cereal while Madison FaceTimed Mom about her spring break plans in Cabo. Apparently, she needed an extra $2,000 for activities and shopping. Mom cooed and promised to transfer the money immediately. I might as well have been invisible. But invisibility, I was learning, had its advantages. Neither parent noticed when I slipped out early for school, and they certainly didn't pay attention to my after-school activities anymore. Which meant they had no idea I'd scheduled a meeting with Mrs. Chen, my guidance counselor. Your Stanford acceptance is incredible, she said, reviewing my file. But you mentioned financial concerns. I kept my voice steady. My parents want me to explore other options. More affordable ones. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. She'd met my parents at school functions, had seen my mother's designer handbags and my father's Rolex collection. But she was professional enough not to comment. There are still some full-ride scholarships available, but the deadlines are tight. Most are need-based, though, and with your family's income. What if my family's income wasn't a factor? I asked carefully. She studied me for a long moment. Are you asking hypothetically? I'm asking what my options would be if I were independent. Alex, she said gently, you can't just declare independence for financial aid purposes. There are very specific criteria. What are they? Mrs. Chen pulled up something on her computer. You need to prove you're at risk of homelessness, have aged out of foster care, are an emancipated minor, or... She paused. Are you safe at home? The question hung in the air. Was I safe? Physically, yes. Emotionally? That was more complicated. But I couldn't claim abuse when the worst thing my parents did was ignore me. Neglect wasn't the same as danger, and I wouldn't lie about something that serious. I'm safe, I said. But I think I need to research emancipation. Mrs. Chen looked troubled. That's a serious legal process. You need to prove you can support yourself financially, have stable housing, demonstrate maturity, and your parents would have to be notified. My parents. Who would probably laugh at the paperwork and then ground me for wasting their time. What about other scholarships? Private ones? Let me pull some options. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. There's the Morrison Foundation, full ride plus stipend, but it's for students who've overcome significant adversity. The Horizon Scholarship covers everything but requires you to commit to working in underserved communities after graduation. And there are several smaller ones that could stack together. I took notes frantically. Each application would require essays, recommendations, sometimes interviews. And I'd have to do it all without my parents knowing, because the moment they found out I was still pursuing expensive schools, they'd shut it down. The deadlines range from next week to early March, Mrs. Chen continued. It's a lot of work to do in secret. I can handle it. She studied me again. Alex, can I ask why you don't just talk to your parents? Sometimes families need time to process big decisions. They've made their position clear, I cut her off. They want me to figure it out myself. So that's what I'm doing. After school, I drove to the public library and set up camp in the quietest corner I could find. If I was going to disappear from my family's life, I needed to be strategic. Methodical. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of the page: figure it out. Then I started planning my escape. The first complication came 2 days later when Madison called home in tears. I was in my room working on scholarship essays when I heard Mom's voice echoing up the stairway. What do you mean you failed organic chemistry? Honey, calm down, we'll figure this out. Figure this out. Funny how those words meant something completely different when applied to the golden child. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened as the family crisis unfolded. Madison had apparently been failing for months but hadn't told anyone. Now she was at risk of losing her pre-med track, her sorority standing, and possibly her enrollment at Columbia entirely. Book a flight home this weekend, Dad's voice joined the conversation. We'll get you a tutor, maybe talk to the dean. There has to be something we can do. Within an hour, they'd hired a private educational consultant for $3,000 and scheduled a meeting with Columbia's academic affairs office. Dad even took time off work, something he'd never done for any of my school events. The irony was suffocating. Madison gets a rescue squad for failing a class she barely attended, while I couldn't get $15,000 for housing at one of the world's best universities. But their distraction worked in my favor. While they orchestrated Madison's academic salvation, I continued my clandestine scholarship applications. The Morrison Foundation essay was brutal. Describe a significant adversity you've overcome and how it shaped your character. I stared at the blank document for hours. What adversity? Being ignored by wealthy parents wasn't exactly overcoming poverty or abuse. Other applicants probably had real stories: foster care, homelessness, family addiction, serious illness. I almost gave up on that application entirely until I realized something: emotional neglect was adversity, even if it came wrapped in privilege. I just had to frame it carefully. I wrote about invisibility. About being the spare child in a family that valued image over substance. About learning self-reliance not by choice but by necessity, because asking for help meant facing rejection from the people who should love you unconditionally. About maintaining perfect grades not for praise but for survival, because academic failure would mean complete dismissal. It felt like performing surgery on myself with a pen. The Horizon Scholarship essay was easier: why do you want to serve underserved communities? I wrote about understanding what it felt like to be overlooked, to have your potential dismissed, to be told your dreams don't matter. About wanting to help other invisible kids figure out their own paths forward. By Friday night, I'd completed 6 applications. My fingers ached from typing, and I'd consumed enough coffee to fuel a small aircraft. But I was getting somewhere. That's when the second complication hit. Alex, family meeting, Mom called up the stairs. I found them in the living room: Mom, Dad, and Madison, who'd apparently flown in while I was at work. Madison looked appropriately contrite, clutching a tissue and wearing the wounded expression that usually preceded complete parental forgiveness. We wanted to talk to you about college, Dad began, and my heart stopped for a moment. Had they changed their minds? Realized their mistake? With Madison's situation, we've been thinking about family priorities, Mom continued. Education is important, but so is staying close to home during challenging times. My stomach dropped. We think you should consider State University instead of running off to California, Dad said. It's more affordable, and you could live at home to help support Madison through this difficult period. Support Madison? Of course. She needs her family right now, Mom added. And frankly, we need to focus our resources on getting her back on track. I looked at Madison, who had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed. I didn't ask for this, she mumbled. But she didn't refuse it either. What if I got scholarships? I asked quietly. Alex, be realistic, Dad said. Full rides are practically impossible to get. I almost laughed. They had no idea what I'd been working on, no clue that their dismissal had lit a fire under me that wouldn't be extinguished. You're right, I said instead. I should be realistic. Realistic about the fact that I was truly on my own. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and made a decision that would change everything. If I was going to disappear from their lives completely, I needed to be more than just financially independent. I needed to be untraceable. The idea came to me like a lightning bolt: what if Alex Morrison, their disappointing spare child, simply ceased to exist? Monday morning, I called in sick to school and took the bus downtown to the Social Security office. I told the clerk I needed information about changing my name, claiming it was for a school civics project. She handed me a thick packet of forms and explained the process. Legal name changes required court approval, background checks, and publication in local newspapers, unless you met certain criteria. If you could prove you were a victim of domestic violence, stalking, or other safety concerns, the process could be sealed. More importantly, if you were over 17 and could demonstrate financial independence, parental consent wasn't required. I studied those forms like they contained the secrets of the universe. The financial independence requirement was steep. I'd need to prove I could support myself for at least 6 months, with documentation of income, housing, and living expenses. My part-time jobs at the bookstore and tutoring center wouldn't be nearly enough. Unless I got creative. Wednesday afternoon, I visited Mr. Rodriguez, my debate coach and AP government teacher. He'd always been supportive, and I needed at least 3 character references for various scholarship applications. Of course I'll write you a recommendation, he said, reviewing my list. But Alex, this is an unusual number of applications. Are you having financial difficulties I should know about? I prepared for this question. My parents want me to explore all options before making such a big investment in my education. He nodded approvingly. Smart approach. Actually, I might have another opportunity for you. I do consulting work for several nonprofits, and one of them needs someone to help with data entry and filing. It's legitimate remote work, 20 hours a week at $15 an hour. Interested? 20 hours at $15 was $300 a week, over $1,000 a month. Combined with my existing jobs, I'd have enough income to meet the independence requirements. Very interested, I said, trying not to sound desperate. I'll email you the details tonight. They need someone who can start immediately and work independently. Independently. That word was starting to sound less like an insult and more like a superpower. Thursday brought another family crisis that worked perfectly in my favor. Madison's academic probation had become official, and Columbia was requiring her to take a semester off. The meltdown was spectacular: tears, accusations that the professors were out to get her, and demands that Dad's lawyer somehow fix everything. While my parents spent the evening researching educational attorneys and discussing whether to buy Madison's way into a different university, I quietly opened a checking account at a credit union across town. Somewhere they'd never think to look. The bank officer was helpful when I explained I was preparing for college and wanted to learn financial responsibility. She even waived the minimum balance requirement when I showed her my acceptance letters. "Stanford, wow," she said admiringly. "Your parents must be so proud." "They're very supportive," I lied smoothly. By Friday, I had 3 new scholarship applications completed and a plan forming in my mind. The Morrison Foundation had responded to my essay submission, requesting an interview. The Horizon Scholarship wanted additional documentation. 2 smaller scholarships had already sent rejection letters, but I wasn't discouraged. I was getting somewhere. That weekend, while Madison held court in the living room detailing her academic persecution, I researched something else entirely: how to legally disappear from your family's life without technically running away. The answer was simpler than I'd expected. You just had to be very, very patient. And I was learning that patience, like independence, was something I could figure out myself. The Morrison Foundation interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 4 p.m. Video call. Professional attire required. I stared at the email confirmation, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it, my first real shot at complete financial independence. But I had one massive problem: I owned exactly 0 professional clothing, and asking my parents for money to buy interview attire would raise questions I couldn't answer. "Think, Alex," I muttered to myself, pacing my bedroom. "Figure it out." Those words had become my personal mantra, but they stung a little less each time I used them. Monday after school, I found myself standing outside Madison's old bedroom, now her home base, during her Columbia crisis. She was sprawled across her bed, scrolling through her phone while Mom brought her a sandwich on an actual silver tray. "Madison." I knocked on the doorframe. "Can I borrow something?" She looked up, surprised. We rarely spoke directly anymore. "Like what?" "A blazer maybe. I have a thing for school." Madison's closet was a monument to parental favoritism: designer pieces with tags still attached, shoes that cost more than my monthly tutoring income, accessories I'd never seen her wear. She pulled out a navy blazer that probably cost more than my car. "This should fit," she said, then paused. "Alex? Are you okay? You've been weird lately. More quiet than usual." For a moment, I almost told her everything. Madison might have been the golden child, but she wasn't cruel. Just oblivious to her privilege. "I'm fine," I said instead. "Just stressed about college stuff." She nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, college is brutal. I mean, look at me, even with all the advantages, I'm still struggling." All the advantages. At least she was self-aware enough to acknowledge that. Tuesday came too quickly. I set up my laptop in the public library study room, hoping the neutral background would look professional. The blazer fit perfectly, and I'd styled my hair to look older, more serious. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to my guidance counselor, appeared on screen at exactly 4 p.m. She was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes and an efficient manner. "Alex Morrison," she said, reviewing something off camera. "Your essay about emotional neglect was quite powerful. Can you elaborate on how that experience shaped your academic goals?" I'd practiced this answer dozens of times, but my mouth still went dry. Growing up invisible taught me to rely on myself completely. I realized that validation has to come from within, and that my worth isn't determined by other people's attention or investment in my success. That's mature insight for someone your age. "Tell me about your family's financial situation." This was the minefield I'd been dreading. "My family is comfortable. But they've made it clear that funding my education isn't their priority. I need to find my own path." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "And you're okay with that? Some students might feel bitter about being denied family support." "Bitter takes energy I'd rather spend succeeding," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Besides, earning something yourself makes it more valuable." The interview lasted 30 minutes. Dr. Chen asked about my volunteer work, my career goals, my plans for giving back to the community. I answered honestly, drawing on the strange clarity that had emerged from my family's rejection. "We'll have a decision within 2 weeks," she said finally. "But Alex, whatever happens, you should be proud of how you've handled this situation. That takes real character." After she disconnected, I sat in the empty study room feeling hollowed out but hopeful. One way or another, I was moving forward. Wednesday brought an unexpected complication that nearly derailed everything. I was working my shift at the bookstore when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom: "Come home immediately. We need to talk." My blood turned to ice water. Had they found out about the scholarship applications? The bank account? The name change research? I drove home in a state of controlled panic, running through possible explanations and cover stories. But when I walked into the house, I found my parents sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers between them. Tax documents. Financial statements. College savings account records. "Sit down," Dad said, his voice unreadable. I sat, my hands clenched in my lap to stop them from shaking. "We've been reviewing our finances," Mom began, "and we realize we may have been hasty about the college situation." My heart stopped. "Madison's academic issues have been expensive to address," Dad continued. "But we don't want you to think we don't value your achievements." Were they about to reverse course? Offer to pay for Stanford after all? "So we've decided to establish a small education fund for you," Mom said, sliding a document across the table. $5,000. It's not much, but it should help with community college or state school expenses. $5,000. Madison's spring break to Cabo had cost more than that. I stared at the paper, feeling something crumble inside my chest. This wasn't generosity, it was guilt money. A token gesture to assuage their consciences while still maintaining that I wasn't worth the same investment as Madison. That's very generous, I heard myself saying. Thank you. There is one condition, Dad added. You need to stay local. State university at most. We want you close to home while Madison recovers from her academic setback. And there it was. Even their scraps came with strings attached. I understand, I said, standing up. I appreciate this. I really do. Mom smiled, probably thinking she'd solved the problem with her small sacrifice. Dad nodded approvingly, no doubt feeling magnanimous about his parental largesse. Neither of them noticed that I didn't actually agree to their terms. That night, I lay in bed staring at their $5,000 consolation prize and felt the last of my emotional ties to them quietly snap. They still thought they could control me with money. Still believed I'd accept their conditions and limitations because I had no other choice. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I had 13 days until the Morrison Foundation decision, 6 scholarship applications still pending, and a plan that was finally crystallizing into something beautiful and permanent. I was going to figure it out, all right. Just not the way they expected. The Morrison Foundation rejection email arrived on a Thursday morning while I was eating breakfast alone in our marble kitchen. Madison was upstairs sleeping off another stress headache while my parents handled her latest crisis. Apparently Columbia wanted documentation of her medical leave that didn't exist. We received many qualified applications this year. While your academic achievements are impressive, we felt other candidates better embodied our mission of overcoming significant adversity. I deleted the email and finished my cereal like nothing had happened. The sting was there, but it felt distant now, like watching someone else get punched. One door closed. 6 others still open. But the weekend brought news that made my stomach drop through the floor. Family meeting, Dad announced Saturday morning, using that tone that meant someone was in trouble. I found them in the living room again, the same formation as before, but this time their expressions were different. Suspicious. Madison looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. We had an interesting conversation with Mrs. Chen yesterday, Mom began, her voice dangerously calm. My blood turned to slush. Guidance counselors weren't supposed to discuss students with parents without permission, but technically my parents could request general information about my academic standing. She mentioned you've been asking about unusual financial aid options, Dad continued. Independent student status. Emancipation requirements. I kept my face blank, channeling every debate tournament I'd ever won. I was researching all possibilities. Isn't that what you wanted? Don't get smart with us, Mom snapped. She also said you've been submitting scholarship applications without discussing them with anyone. What scholarships? The trap was closing, but I'd prepared for this moment. Local ones mostly. Small amounts. Nothing that would interfere with your plans for me. It wasn't technically a lie, some of the scholarships were local, and the amounts individually weren't huge. Show us, Dad demanded. Show you what? The applications. The essays. All of it. Madison shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should just. This doesn't concern you, Dad cut her off, never taking his eyes off me. Alex, we're waiting. I let a moment of silence stretch between us. Let them think they'd cornered me. I don't have them with me, I said finally. They're on the school computers. Then we'll go to school Monday morning and review them together, Mom declared. All of them. Before you submit anything else. My heart hammered, but I nodded calmly. Okay. They thought they'd won. Thought they'd caught me in some kind of deception that they could control and contain. They had no idea that I'd been doing all my scholarship work on the library computers using a private email account they'd never seen. Monday morning, I sat in Mrs. Chen's office while my parents reviewed the 3 decoy applications I prepared for exactly this scenario, small, local scholarships that totaled less than $3,000 combined. These seem reasonable, Dad said grudgingly. Very appropriate, Mom agreed. Much more realistic than your Stanford fantasies. Mrs. Chen looked troubled but said nothing. Professional ethics prevented her from revealing that these weren't the only applications I discussed with her, but I could see the questions in her eyes. I think we can support these applications, Dad declared, as if his approval meant anything to the scholarship committees. They left satisfied that they'd reasserted control over their rebellious child. What they didn't know was that the Horizon Scholarship had requested a phone interview for Wednesday, 2 other applications had advanced to second-round consideration, and I just received an email from Pacific Northwest University offering me a full academic ride plus a work-study position in their financial aid office. Pacific Northwest wasn't Stanford, but it was 3,000 miles away from here. More importantly, they'd included information about their student services for transitioning adults seeking independence from family support systems. Apparently, I wasn't the only teenager who needed to figure things out alone. Tuesday night, I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I drove to the credit union and deposited my most recent paychecks, over $2,000 I'd been saving from my 3 part-time jobs. Then I opened a second account under the name I'd been researching, River Chin Morrison. The bank officer didn't even blink. Apparently, teenagers preparing for college independence was more common than I'd thought. River Chin Morrison had a nice sound to it. River for flowing forward, never backward. Chen after Mrs. Chen, the only adult who'd actually listened to me. Morrison from the scholarship foundation that had rejected Alex but might accept someone new. River Morrison would be someone who'd figured it out completely. Someone whose family would never find them, no matter how hard they looked. The Horizon Scholarship phone interview was scheduled for Wednesday at 3 p.m. I'd planned everything perfectly, I'd be at my tutoring job, could take the call in the empty conference room, and my parents would never know. What I hadn't planned for was Madison answering my phone. I'd left it charging in my room while I showered, and apparently it had rung just as Madison was walking past my door. When I came out with wet hair and a towel around my shoulders, she was sitting on my bed holding my phone with a confused expression. Someone from the Horizon Foundation called, she said slowly. They wanted to confirm your interview time for this afternoon. My stomach plummeted to my feet. What did you tell them? That you were in the shower and I'd have you call back. She studied my face carefully. Alex, what interview? I thought mom and dad already saw all your applications. The lie came smoothly, born from weeks of practice. It's a local internship program. Part of the applications they approved. But Madison wasn't as oblivious as everyone assumed. The woman said something about a full scholarship review. For college. Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Madison had always been self-absorbed, but she wasn't stupid. And right now, she was looking at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. You're planning something, she said quietly. Something big. I'm planning to go to college. Just like you did. Not like me. She stood up, still holding my phone. I never had to lie about anything. I never had to sneak around or hide applications or... She trailed off, realization dawning across her face. Oh my God. They really said no, didn't they? To Stanford. They actually said no. I reached for my phone, but she pulled it back. Madison, give it back. How many applications did you really submit? It doesn't matter. How many, Alex? The desperation in her voice caught me off guard. Madison sounded almost guilty. 11, I said finally. 11 real ones. She sank back onto my bed like the number had physically hit her. 11. Jesus, Alex. And they made you show them those tiny local ones like you were asking permission to apply for McDonald's. Can I have my phone back now? Instead, she looked down at it with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. I could have gotten into Columbia with a 3.0, she said quietly. You know that, right? Dad's alumnus connections, the donation he made to their building fund sophomore year. I didn't earn anything. Madison. And I'm failing out anyway. She laughed bitterly. The golden child can't even succeed when everything's handed to her. This was dangerous territory. Madison having an existential crisis right now could derail everything if she decided to confess to our parents or demand some kind of sibling heart-to-heart. You'll figure it out, I said, using their favorite phrase deliberately. You always do. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's what they say to you, isn't it? Figure it out yourself. I held out my hand for the phone. This time, she gave it back. Are you going to tell them? I asked. Madison was quiet for so long I thought she hadn't heard me. Then she shook her head slowly. No. But Alex. Whatever you're really planning, be careful. They're not going to just let you disappear. I'm not disappearing. I'm just going to college. She looked at me with something that might have been admiration or might have been fear. Sure you are. After she left, I called the Horizon Foundation back and rescheduled for Thursday. Then I sat on my bed, staring at my phone and wondering if Madison's moment of clarity was going to become my biggest problem. Because she was right about one thing, they weren't going to just let me disappear. Which meant I needed to disappear faster than they could stop me. Thursday's interview with the Horizon Foundation went better than I'd dared hope. Dr. Martinez was impressed by my community service plans and my unique perspective on educational inequality. But the real breakthrough came Friday morning when my phone buzzed during first period. Congratulations, Alex. We're pleased to offer you the Pacific Northwest University President's Scholarship, full tuition, room, board, and a $3,000 annual stipend for books and personal expenses. I excused myself to the bathroom and read the email 3 times before it sank in. Full ride. 3,000 miles away. No parental approval required for students over 18. I was free. But my celebration was cut short when I returned to find Madison waiting by my locker, her face pale and determined. We need to talk, she said. Now. She dragged me to the empty auditorium and turned to face me with an expression I'd never seen before, part guilt, part desperation, part something that looked almost like respect. I know what you're doing, she said without preamble. My blood chilled. I don't know what you. You're going to vanish. Her voice was steady, matter of fact. Graduate, disappear, never come back. I would do the same thing if I were you. I stared at her, my mind racing through denials and deflections, but something in her eyes stopped me. How long have you known? I asked quietly. Since the phone call yesterday. But honestly, I should have figured it out months ago. She sat down heavily in one of the auditorium seats. The way you've been so calm lately, so agreeable when they treat you like garbage. You're not planning to stick around long enough for it to matter. Madison. I'm not going to stop you, she said quickly. But I need you to know something first. About Columbia. About why I'm really failing. This felt like a trap, but I sat down beside her anyway. I hate it there, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hate everything about it. The classes, the people, the pressure to be perfect all the time. But every time I try to tell mom and dad, they just throw more money at tutors and consultants and academic advisors. So drop out, I said simply. She laughed bitterly. And go where? Do what? I'm 21 years old and I've never made a single decision for myself. Never had a job, never paid a bill, never figured anything out. They've made me completely helpless. The irony was suffocating. While they'd forced me to become independent, they trapped Madison in a golden cage of dependency. You could learn, I started. Could I? She turned to look at me directly. Alex, I can't even do my own laundry. I've never been grocery shopping alone. I don't know how to open a bank account or apply for a job or... God, I don't even know how much rent costs. I felt something crack inside my chest, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. We were both prisoners, just with different bars. Why are you telling me this? Madison was quiet for a long moment. Because I'm going to help you disappear completely. But I need you to teach me how to be independent first. What? I want to learn what you've learned. How to survive without them. How to figure things out. Her voice grew stronger. And in exchange, I'll make sure they don't realize you're gone until it's too late to stop you. I stared at my sister, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Under all that golden child perfection was a person as trapped as I was, just in a different way. How? I asked. Madison smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked genuine. Leave that to me. I might be failing organic chemistry, but I'm about to get a PhD in distraction. Over the next week, Madison proved she was serious about our unlikely alliance. She started asking me questions, real ones, not the casual small talk we defaulted to for years. How do you balance 3 jobs with school? She asked Tuesday morning, cornering me in the kitchen while our parents were still asleep. Time management and caffeine, I said, pouring my coffee. And accepting that some things have to be good enough instead of perfect. She nodded like I'd revealed some profound wisdom. Show me your budget. My what? Your budget. How you manage money without help. The word came out strained, like admitting she'd never managed money herself was physically painful. So I did. I showed her my simple spreadsheet, income from 3 jobs, expenses broken down by category, savings goals. She studied it like a foreign language. You really live on $400 a month? She asked, incredulous. Not counting what I'm saving for college. But yeah. I spend more than that on coffee. The revelation hung between us like a chasm. But instead of making me angry, it clarified something important. Madison wasn't my enemy. She was just another casualty of our parents' impossible standards, albeit a more pampered one. Teach me, she said quietly. So I did. I opened her a checking account at a different bank, helped her apply for her first credit card, showed her how to track expenses. In return, she became my unwitting cover story. When Mom asked why I was spending so much time at the library, Madison casually mentioned she'd asked me to help her with study strategies. When Dad wondered about my increased work hours, Madison suggested I was probably trying to save money for college textbooks, such a responsible approach. She was surprisingly good at misdirection. But our parents weren't completely oblivious. Wednesday evening brought a curveball that nearly shattered everything. We've decided to hire a college consultant for you too, Mom announced over dinner. Someone to help guide your application process and make sure you're making smart choices. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. A consultant would want to review all my applications, discuss my options, potentially contact schools directly. They'd uncover my real plans within days. That's expensive, I said carefully. Is it really necessary? We can afford it, Dad said, missing the irony entirely. Madison's consultant has been very helpful with her situation. Dr. Patterson knows the admissions landscape inside and out. Dr. Patterson. Madison's crisis manager who'd been working to get her back into Columbia's good graces. If she started digging into my applications, she'd discover Pacific Northwest University, the name change research, everything. I meet with her Friday afternoon, Mom continued. We'll discuss your goals and timeline. 3 days. I had 3 days to figure out how to handle this without blowing up months of careful planning. That night, Madison found me pacing in my room like a caged animal. I heard, she said, closing the door behind her. About Dr. Patterson. This ruins everything, I said, my voice tight with panic. She's going to want documentation, transcripts sent to schools, parent meetings. Not necessarily. I stopped pacing. What do you mean? Madison's smile was sharp, calculating. Dr. Patterson works for whoever is paying her. And right now, that's our parents. But what if she had a really compelling reason to recommend they back off and let you handle things independently? Like what? Like professional advice that helicopter parenting during college applications actually hurts students' chances. Madison pulled out her phone. I'm going to call her tonight. Tell her I've been thinking about our family dynamics and I'm worried they're making the same mistakes with you that they made with me. She'll never believe. Alex, she's watched me crash and burn for months while our parents threw money at every problem. She knows their approach doesn't work. Madison's voice grew confident. I'm going to tell her that your independence and self-motivation are your biggest strengths, and that parental interference could actually hurt your applications. It was brilliant. Risky, but brilliant. What if she calls their bluff and recommends they increase involvement instead? Madison shook her head. She won't. Her reputation depends on results, and I'm not exactly a shining example of her success right now. She'll want to try a different approach with you. And if this backfires, then we move to plan B. Which is? Madison's smile turned genuinely wicked. I have a complete meltdown Friday morning that requires immediate crisis intervention. Amazing how family emergencies can derail the best laid plans. Looking at my sister, really seeing her strategic mind in action for the first time, I realized something that should have terrified me. Madison wasn't just learning how to be independent. She was learning how to disappear too. Madison's plan with Dr. Patterson worked flawlessly, too flawlessly. Friday afternoon, Mom returned from their meeting with a strange expression I couldn't quite read. She found me in the kitchen doing homework and sat down across from me with the careful deliberation of someone delivering important news. Dr. Patterson made some interesting observations about your situation, she began, her manicured fingers drumming against the marble countertop. She thinks we should give you more autonomy in the college process. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart was hammering. Okay. She believes your independence could be an asset in applications. That admissions committees value self-directed students. Mom's tone suggested she found this concept personally offensive. So we're going to step back and let you handle things yourself. The words should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like a trap. That's great, I said carefully. I appreciate the trust. Mom's smile was sharp around the edges. Of course, we'll still want regular updates. And final approval on any decisions. But Dr. Patterson convinced your father that micromanaging might hurt your chances. There it was, the catch. They weren't actually letting go, they were just loosening the leash while keeping hold of the collar. I understand, I said, though understanding and agreeing were two very different things. That evening, Madison cornered me in the hallway with news that made my stomach drop. Dr. Patterson wants to meet with you directly, she whispered urgently. Next Wednesday. She told Mom it's standard procedure for independent track students. What does that mean? I don't know, but Alex, she was asking weird questions about you today. About your job history, your extracurriculars, whether you'd mentioned any specific schools recently. My blood turned to ice water. What kind of questions? Like she was trying to figure out if you were hiding something. Madison's face was pale. I think I might have made things worse. She keeps talking about how impressive your self-sufficiency is for someone your age. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Dr. Patterson wasn't just a college consultant, she was an investigator. And Madison's attempt to praise my independence had triggered her professional curiosity about exactly how independent I'd become. She's going to dig, I said, more to myself than Madison. What do we do? Before I could answer, Dad's voice boomed up the stairway. Girls. Family meeting. Now. Madison and I exchanged a look of pure panic before trudging downstairs to find our parents in the living room with a laptop open between them. The screen showed what looked like a spreadsheet, and Dad's expression was thunderous. Sit, Mom commanded, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. We sat. We had an interesting conversation with the bank today, Dad began, his words clipped and precise. Apparently, someone has been making some very adult financial decisions recently. My heart stopped. Somehow, they'd found my accounts. Alex, Mom's voice could have frozen fire. Would you like to explain why you have 2 checking accounts, a credit card application, and over $4,000 in savings we knew nothing about? The room tilted sideways. They hadn't just found my accounts, they'd found everything. I've been saving for college, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. You told me to figure it out myself. We told you to explore affordable options, Dad snapped. Not to go behind our backs and establish a secret financial life like some kind of criminal. I supplied helpfully. His face turned red. Don't get smart with us. This stops now. All of it. The accounts get closed, the money gets transferred to an account we control, and you're going to explain exactly what you thought you were doing. I was doing what you asked me to do, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I was figuring it out. By lying to us. By becoming independent. Isn't that what you wanted? Mom leaned forward, her eyes narrow. What we want is honesty. What we want is transparency. What we want is for you to make smart decisions with appropriate guidance. Whose guidance? You won't pay for the schools I want to attend. You won't support my goals. You've made it clear that I'm not worth the same investment as Madison. The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. So I found another way. There is no other way, Dad said flatly. You're 17 years old. You live in our house, follow our rules, and make decisions we approve of. Period. Madison had been silent throughout the confrontation, but now she spoke up quietly. Actually, she's doing exactly what Dr. Patterson said successful students do. Taking initiative, showing maturity. This conversation doesn't involve you, Mom cut her off sharply. But something in Madison's intervention gave me clarity. They were angry because my independence threatened their control. They wanted me to be self-sufficient enough not to cost them money, but dependent enough to still need their approval. You're right, I said, standing up. I should have been more transparent. Dad looked surprised by my sudden cooperation. Good. Now we can. I should have told you that I've been accepted to Pacific Northwest University with a full scholarship. I should have mentioned that I'll be 18 in 6 weeks and legally able to make my own financial decisions. And I definitely should have explained that I don't actually need your permission for any of this. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went white, then red, then white again. Dad looked like I'd physically struck him. You're not going anywhere, he said finally, his voice dangerously quiet. Not until we sort this out. Not until we understand exactly what you think you're doing. I'm going to college, I said simply. Just like Madison did. Not like this. Not behind our backs. Not without our approval. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and felt the last threads of obligation snap cleanly. Actually, I said, I think I am. And for the first time in my life, I walked away from them mid-conversation, leaving them sputtering in the living room while I climbed the stairs to my room. Behind me, I heard Madison's voice, calm and clear, you know, maybe Dr. Patterson was right about the independence thing. The real war was just beginning. The war began in earnest Sunday morning when I woke up to find my car keys missing. Looking for something? Mom asked sweetly when I came downstairs, dangling my keychain like a cat toy. My keys. Your father's keys, technically. The car is registered in his name, insurance paid by us. Same with your phone. She gestured to Dad, who was holding my iPhone with a satisfied smirk. Amazing how much control parents actually have when you think about it. I kept my voice level. I need to get to work. No, you need to sit down and have an honest conversation about your future, Dad said. Dr. Patterson is coming over this afternoon for an emergency session. She's very concerned about some discrepancies in your story. My stomach clenched, but I'd been preparing for this escalation. What discrepancies? Well, for starters, Pacific Northwest University has no record of offering you any scholarship, Mom said, pulling out a printed email. Dr. Patterson called them Friday. Imagine our surprise. The blood drained from my face. That was impossible. I had the acceptance letter, the scholarship details, everything in writing. Let me see that, I said, reaching for the paper. Mom pulled it back. I don't think so. Not until we get some real answers. Behind them, Madison appeared in the doorway looking panicked. She caught my eye and mouthed something I couldn't quite make out, but her expression was pure warning. Call them yourself, I said finally. Right now. Ask for the financial aid office. Dad's confidence wavered slightly. It's Sunday. They have emergency weekend services for admitted students. The number's on their website. For a moment, doubt flickered across both their faces. Then Mom's jaw tightened with renewed determination. Fine. We'll call tomorrow. In the meantime, you're not going anywhere. No work, no school activities, no leaving this house until we sort this out. You can't just imprison me. We can't. Dad's smile was cold. You're a minor living in our home. We provide your food, shelter, transportation, and education. We can absolutely restrict your movements until you start acting like a responsible member of this family. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, but I forced myself to stay calm. Panic would only make this worse. What about school tomorrow? We'll be having a conversation with your principal about your recent activities, Mom said. Mrs. Chen has some explaining to do about encouraging deceptive behavior. My heart sank. They were going to drag Mrs. Chen into this, potentially damaging her career because she tried to help me. The thought of my guidance counselor facing consequences for my choices made me feel sick. Leave her out of this, I said quietly. That's not your decision to make anymore, Dad replied. You've proven you can't be trusted with decisions. Madison cleared her throat from the doorway. Maybe I should. Go to your room, Mom snapped. This doesn't concern you. But as Madison retreated upstairs, she shot me one last look that was pure determination. Whatever she was planning, I could only hope it would buy me time to figure out my next move. Because sitting in our pristine living room, stripped of phone and car keys, facing parents who'd rather imprison me than let me succeed on my own terms, I realized something terrifying. They weren't going to let me disappear gradually. Which meant I'd have to vanish all at once. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and listening to the sound of my own house becoming a prison. Mom had checked on me 3 times, and I'd heard Dad testing the locks on all the exterior doors. They'd even taken my laptop, claiming they needed to review my digital activities. What they didn't know was that I'd been paranoid enough to do everything important on the library computers using accounts they'd never find. At 2 a.m., my bedroom door creaked open and Madison slipped inside like a ghost. Don't talk, she whispered, pressing something into my hand. They took your phone, but they forgot I had a spare charger for this model. It was an old iPhone, probably one of her discarded upgrades. The screen was cracked, but it powered on. I set up a new Apple ID, she continued in an embarrassed whisper. Alex Morrison.2024 at Gmail. Password is figure it out 123. I already logged into the Pacific Northwest portal. My heart stopped. Madison. They weren't lying about no scholarship record, she said, and my world tilted. But that's because you applied under Alex Morrison, and the acceptance letter is addressed to A. Morrison. The financial aid office thinks you're someone named Adrian Morrison from Portland. Relief and panic hit me simultaneously. A clerical error had nearly destroyed everything, but it also meant my acceptance was real. There's more, Madison continued. Dr. Patterson isn't just a college consultant. Mom hired her to investigate you specifically. She's a former private investigator who specializes in troubled teen intervention. My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? It means they think you're having some kind of breakdown and they're treating this like a mental health crisis instead of a college planning disagreement. Madison's voice was grim. Dr. Patterson recommended something called intensive family therapy and structured intervention for oppositional behavior. The words hit me like physical blows. They were going to pathologize my independence, turn my escape plan into evidence of psychological instability. How long do I have? Dar. Patterson comes back Tuesday with a treatment plan. But Alex. Madison's voice broke slightly. I heard them talking about residential programs. Places that specialize in reorienting kids who become dangerously independent. Residential programs. They were planning to send me away, not to college, but to some kind of rehabilitation facility for the crime of wanting to control my own life. I have to leave, I whispered. Tomorrow. I know. That's why I'm here. Madison pressed something else into my hand, a thick envelope. There's $3,000 in cash. I've been slowly withdrawing from my accounts for weeks, claiming textbook expenses and sorority fees. I stared at her in the darkness. Why are you doing this? Because watching them try to break you is showing me exactly what they'll do to me if I ever step out of line. Her voice was steady, but I could hear tears underneath. And because you're the only person in this family who's ever treated me like a real person instead of a trophy. Madison. There's a Greyhound station downtown. I looked up the schedule. There's a bus to Seattle at 6:15 a.m. that connects to Portland, then to the university town. If you leave before 5 a.m., you'll have almost a full day head start before they realize you're really gone. My mind raced. It could work. Just barely, but it could work. What about you? When they find out you helped me. Madison's smile was visible even in the darkness. I'm going to tell them I was so traumatized by this family crisis that I need to take a mental health leave from Columbia. Very trendy these days. I'll probably need intensive therapy and maybe a few months at a wellness retreat in California. You're going to disappear too. I'm going to learn how to exist without them, she corrected. You're teaching me that it's possible. Outside my bedroom door, a floorboard creaked. Madison froze, then melted back toward the door like smoke. 5 a.m., she breathed. Back door. I'll disable the alarm at 4:45. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with a contraband phone, $3,000 in cash, and less than 3 hours to pack a life that could fit in a single backpack. The real escape was finally beginning. At 4:30 a.m., I sat on my bedroom floor with everything I owned spread out around me like pieces of a dismantled life. My entire existence had to fit into one backpack and a small duffel bag. Anything more would slow me down or draw attention. Important documents went into a waterproof folder: birth certificate, social security card, high school transcripts, the Pacific Northwest acceptance letter. 3 changes of clothes, basic toiletries, the cracked phone Madison had given me, and her envelope of cash. Everything else, photos, books, keepsakes from 17 years of living in this house, would stay behind like abandoned artifacts. I was zipping up the backpack when my bedroom door suddenly swung open. My heart exploded in my chest as Dad stepped inside, already dressed for work despite the early hour. For a frozen moment, we stared at each other, me crouched on the floor with packed bags, him taking in the scene with growing comprehension. Going somewhere? His voice was dangerously quiet. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Every carefully planned excuse evaporated under his stare. I asked you a question, Alex. Think. Breathe. Salvage this somehow. I was organizing, I said, my voice cracking slightly. Deciding what to donate before college. You know, downsizing like you're always telling me to do. Dad stepped further into the room, his eyes scanning the packed bags, the cleared dresser, the empty desk. Organizing. At 4:30 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Too much stress from everything that's been happening. Stand up. I stood slowly, trying to position myself between him and the bags. Maybe if he didn't see the documents, the cash. Move away from the bags, Alex. My legs felt like water, but I stepped aside. Dad crouched down and unzipped the backpack with methodical precision. The folder of documents was right on top. His face went white, then red, then something beyond anger that I'd never seen before. Barbara, he bellowed, loud enough to wake the entire house. Get down here now. Within seconds, Mom was in the doorway in her robe, Madison hovering behind her looking terrified. Look what I found, Dad said, holding up my birth certificate and the Pacific Northwest letter. Our daughter was about to run away. I wasn't running away, I said desperately. I was just. You were just what? Taking all your legal documents on a morning jog. Mom pushed past Madison and snatched the letter from Dad's hands. Her face went through the same color progression as she read. Adrian Morrison, she said slowly. A. Morrison. You've been lying about your name too. It's a clerical error. The scholarship is real, I can prove. Enough. Dad's voice was loud enough to rattle the windows. No more lies. No more deception. No more treating this family like we're your enemies. You are my enemies. The words tore out of me before I could stop them. You've made it clear that I don't matter, that my dreams don't count, that I'm not worth the same investment as Madison. So yes, I was leaving. Yes, I was going to disappear. Because staying here is killing me. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Madison looked shocked by my outburst. Then Mom stepped forward, and her voice was colder than Arctic wind. Dr. Patterson was right. You're having a complete psychological break from reality. She turned to Dad. Call her. Now. Tell her we need emergency intervention immediately. No, I said, backing toward the window. You can't just. We can and we will, Dad said, already pulling out his phone. You're clearly a danger to yourself and potentially others. This level of deception, this planning to abandon your family, it's not normal teenage rebellion, Alex. It's pathological. Madison stepped forward. Maybe we should just calm down, Anne. Go to your room, Mom snapped. This is exactly the kind of situation Dr. Patterson warned us about. Enablement from family members who don't understand the severity of the psychological issues. I watched my last ally get dismissed, saw the walls closing in from all sides. In less than an hour, I'd gone from escaped to captured, from free to diagnosed with mental illness for the crime of wanting independence. Dad was already dialing Dr. Patterson's emergency number. I had maybe minutes before this became irreversible. That's when the fire alarm went off. The piercing shriek filled the house, drowning out Dad's phone conversation and sending Mom into immediate panic mode. Red lights flashed in the hallway, and the automated voice began its mechanical chant, fire detected. Evacuate immediately. Fire detected. What the hell, Dad started, but Mom was already pushing past him toward the stairs. Madison, she screamed. Where's Madison? I caught a glimpse of my sister at the end of the hallway, calmly walking toward the back staircase with a small candle in her hand and what looked like a kitchen towel. She saw me looking and mouthed one word, run. The chaos was immediate and total. Dad dropped his phone to help Mom search for the source of the alarm. Smoke was definitely coming from somewhere, I could smell it now, acrid and sharp. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to trigger every sensor in our overly sensitive security system. The kitchen. Mom shrieked. Something's burning in the kitchen. They both bolted downstairs, shouting for Madison, leaving me alone with my packed bags and an open window. I didn't hesitate. The bags went out the window first, landing in Mom's prized rose bushes with a soft thud. Then I climbed out myself, dropping the 8 feet to the ground and rolling the way I'd learned in high school theater when we did stage combat training. The fire alarm was still wailing as I grabbed my bags and ran for the back gate. Behind me, I could hear Dad yelling at the alarm company, Mom screaming about smoke damage to her kitchen, and the distant sound of fire trucks approaching. Madison had bought me the chaos I needed, but she'd also probably just destroyed any chance of her own escape. The guilt hit me like a physical blow, but I couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. The Greyhound station was 12 blocks away. I ran the first 6, walked quickly through the rest, trying to look like an early morning commuter instead of a runaway teenager. The pre-dawn streets were mostly empty except for delivery trucks and the occasional jogger. At 6:10 a.m., I was standing in line to buy my ticket when the cracked phone Madison had given me buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Kitchen fire contained. Told them I was stress baking at 5 a.m. and fell asleep. They're too busy being mad about smoke damage to realize you're gone yet. Go. M. The bus to Seattle was already boarding. I handed over cash for my ticket, $1.27 for a one-way fare that would take me 1,200 miles away from everything I'd ever known. As I climbed the steps, my phone buzzed again. Also disabled Find My iPhone on all family devices and told them you left your phone in kitchen during fire panic. You're invisible for now. Make it count. Love you. M. I found a seat in the back and watched through the window as the sun started to rise over the city I was leaving forever. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, but underneath the terror was something else. Relief. For the first time in months, no one knew where I was. No one was monitoring my choices or questioning my decisions or planning interventions for my psychological issues. The bus pulled away from the station at exactly 6:15 a.m., and with it, Alex Morrison began to truly disappear. River Chin Morrison was about to be born. But first, I had 18 hours of highways between me and my new life to figure out exactly who that person was going to be. The Pacific Northwest University campus was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd expected. Sprawling green quads, brick buildings covered in ivy, students who looked confident and purposeful instead of trapped and desperate. Most importantly, it was 1,200 miles away from anyone who'd ever called me Alex Morrison. River Chin Morrison had officially existed for 3 months now. The legal name change had gone through 2 weeks after I'd established residency, gotten a job at the campus bookstore, and enrolled in summer orientation classes. The judge had been surprisingly understanding when I'd explained my need for a fresh start independent from family financial control. I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, barely larger than my old bedroom, but completely mine, when the cracked phone Madison had given me finally rang. I'd been expecting this call for weeks, dreading it and longing for it in equal measure. Alex? Madison's voice was small, uncertain. River, I corrected gently. How did you find this number? I've been tracking the phone usage. Took me forever to figure out which carrier you'd switched to. She paused. Are you okay? Really okay? I looked around my apartment, at the textbook stacked on my desk, the acceptance letter from my work-study supervisor for a promotion, the small potted plant I bought myself just because I could. I'm more than okay. I'm free. Good. That's good. Madison's voice cracked slightly. Things got interesting here after you left. How interesting? Well, Dr. Patterson's emergency intervention was pretty spectacular when they realized their patient had vanished. Mom had what I can only describe as a complete breakdown. Dad hired 2 different private investigators. Madison's laugh was hollow. Turns out when you disappear properly, you really disappear. They found nothing. I felt a flicker of something, not quite guilt, but acknowledgement. Are you glad you figured it out? I smiled, looking at the photo on my desk, not of family, but of my study group from organic chemistry, the class Madison had failed but I was acing. Yeah. I really am. Good. Because I wanted to tell you something Mom and Dad don't know yet. What? I legally changed my name too. Madison Morrison is gone forever. What's your new name? Phoenix Morrison, she said, and I could hear her smile through the phone. Because sometimes you have to burn everything down to rise up properly. We talked for another hour about our new lives, our plans, our dreams that no one else would approve or disapprove of because they belonged entirely to us. When we finally hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment feeling something I'd never experienced before. Complete contentment. My parents had told me to figure it out as a dismissal, a punishment, a way to demonstrate my worthlessness. Instead, I'd figured out that I was worth everything, my own respect, my own choices, my own life lived on my own terms. River Morrison had figured it out perfectly. And Alex Morrison, that invisible spare child, was finally, permanently, beautifully gone.